Hello and welcome to our presentation of Abra Suite System Security and System Navigation. To get things started, I'm going to go ahead and log into the Abra application. Let me go ahead and put in a username, a password, and I'll go ahead and access some data. The particular access code that I used is a master user code that allows me to have access to all the various Abra programs in the system. I can access human resources, payroll, attendance, recruiting, or training. If you have a specific user who only wants to have security rights to certain areas of the software, for example, a human resource manager, you can control your settings so when somebody logs into the system like the human resource manager, they would only be able to access various parts of the human resource application. Let's go out here and look at how we would set that up in the application. We'll go out here to Group Security Setup, select Human Resource Manager, and go out here and look at some details. From a security perspective, one of the first things that you can set up is something called group level security. Group level security for this particular HR manager allows us to define what companies this particular person can access, what products this particular person can access with their login. In this particular example, it's human resources and attendance. And once we get into the particular products, we can also designate where they have access and navigation rights to in the application. Can they get into individual screens of information? Can they run reports? Can they access and change code tables? So we can control access from that perspective. If we go out here to a detail level or to a current screen level, you can see that we can set our security parameters so that we can secure information down to a screen level. If you look at the middle tab here in this detail page, you can see that there's access to also field level security for things like address information, phone numbers, salary information, and EEO information. Another security parameter that you can also add to the application, let's say, for example, this particular HR manager works for a certain division or a certain company, but is not allowed to access information for other locations. If that's the case, you can use a specific product group filter to define particular areas or particular employee groups in the software that this particular manager could access. So if you have somebody who's a clerical type of person who's accessing your application, you don't want them to see executive information, you can take specific employee groups and filter them from a security perspective away from certain users of the application. One of the nice things about the security that surrounds the application is not only that it applies to the individual screens of information, fields of information, depending on how you set up your security groups out here, but your security will also tie out to information that is also accessible through the various reports that are available out here in the software. So if there's certain employees that you're not supposed to see, or there's certain pieces of information you're not supposed to have access to, like salary, there's not only a way to block that from the person getting access in the application, but that particular person is also going to be secured from that information, whether they're running a canned report, whether they're running something from the Crystal Report Writer, or whether they're trying to generate some sort of a query out of the Abra Secured Query Manager. Another piece of software that we have available here to help you with your setup of security, if we go out here to the Enterprise Setup, there's a tab out here called the Audit Trail. And this particular audit trail helps us with security. What this allows us to do is actually go out into the system and set particular fields that we want to monitor for change. So for example, if we want to monitor in the software who's making changes to employees' salaries, we can designate that the salary field would be one of the fields that we would want to monitor. We can keep track of who's making changes to employees' salaries, because anytime somebody goes into the application and touches an employee's salary, it will date stamp, time stamp, and user stamp that particular change in the application. Once you have all that information gathered in a database, you can also go out here to your system reports, and there's an area to go out here and access your audit trail reports. You can run audit trail reports by date. You can look at it by individual fields that you're trying to monitor. You can also look at it based on users and what information specific users that are logged into the application are trying to access. The next thing I want to talk about is navigation through the software. In this particular area we're in right now, this is an area called the Activity Center. You can see that in the Activity Center, you can have access to all the various products and all the functionality in those individual products. As another example, let's look at the Human Resource Manager, and let's say that they wanted to access a particular benefit report that they needed to run. From this particular area in the Activity Center, you would select Human Resources. You would go down to Reports, and then access the benefit reports from there. Another form of navigation that we have available in the software is the ability to go through a Windows pull-down type of menu, where we could go up top here to our pull-down list. We could select Reports, go down to the HR application, and again select our benefit reports to be run. Another area that we also have for navigation in the software is an area out here called the Organizer Scheduler. The Organizer Scheduler is a nice tool for navigation in the software if you find that as you use the Abra application that you're performing more task-oriented processes in the system. So for example, if you're constantly in the application hiring people, terminating people, changing people's pay, entering review information, that type of thing, if your work in the system is more task-oriented, the Organizer Scheduler is a great place to use for navigation. What you're able to do here is you're able to actually schedule these tasks in the task builder. So for example, if you look over here at the right-hand side, you would see Record a New Hire. You're able to list the individual tasks that you're supposed to perform on a particular day, and then just by clicking on these particular items, you'll be able to access these individual tasks of information. Another thing that's nice, besides being able to schedule this out here in the Abra system, is you can synchronize the scheduler with your Microsoft Outlook. So that way, if there's particular tasks you're doing in your Abra system, whether it's HR, payroll, whatever the case may be, you can not only see that in the Abra system, but you'll also be able to see it on your Microsoft Outlook, and then, of course, synchronize it with your Palm Pilot, or if you're using some other sort of PDA device, you can go ahead and synchronize your information that way. If we go back to the Activity Center, there's also some definitions that I wanted to review. First of all, we've got these individual categories at the top of these two lists here called actions and processes. An action, if we click into that, or a process, is actually a wizard that's going to run in the application to help you perform a particular task. So whether it's hiring somebody, terminating somebody, giving somebody a job promotion, whatever the case may be, you're going to have a list of screens that you're able to go through to perform that particular function. So let's say, for example, we have an employee that we need to terminate. We'll go out here and launch the process. We'll select a particular employee. And once we select that employee, you'll see that this little task box comes up, and basically what this is are the steps of the wizard. This is going to tell us the individual screens that we would need to go through to perform an employee termination. So because we have an integrated system here, because we've got both HR and payroll running against this particular employee's information, we'd be able to go out and terminate benefits, generate our COBRA information, discontinue certain earnings, look at people's vacation, sick, personal time accruals as far as something that we may need to pay out because of the termination. We could also create a termination check if that were the case. But the wizard will actually help us walk through these individual steps and perform our regular termination functionality here in the software. So these particular areas help us navigate through the system by using wizards. There's another area out here called reports that I wanted to talk about from a navigation perspective. We actually have several different ways of running reports in the application. One of the first ways is to actually go out and run a canned report. So you see in this particular human resource example, lots of different reports that are available to the HR users, not only compliance-specific reports like your OSHA reports, your EEO reports, that type of information, but there's also a lot of just general HR reports that you can access. For example, if we go out here and look at personal information reports, there's things like employee lists, birthday lists, mailing lists. There's an area that you can generate mailing labels and things like that. And this particular area of navigation, when you go out to run your reports, you'll always go to a common area, a common criteria builder to help you build your report. So if you go out here and look at standard criteria, this particular criteria builder is available with all the different reports that you'll be able to run. So you can sort your reports by a certain company code. You can sort it also by division, department, location, whatever organization structures you decide to build in the software. You can also set up your system so that you can run reports for just individual employees or add other types of custom criteria to your report lists. But all the reports that you would access in the system will allow you to use this criteria builder, and you can see in just the HR example there's quite a few different reports to choose from. Again, a mix of compliance reports and regular reporting. Another thing, too, to keep in mind is that when you have reports available that are canned reports in the application, those particular reports were written using the Crystal Report Writer. If you find a report that you commonly run, but when you look at the report you say, you know, I wish there was additional information here, I wish I had employee salary information out here, or I wish the supervisor's name would post on this report, or whatever the case may be, you're able to take these reports, bring them into the Crystal Report Writer, and make modifications to the reports. Once you make those modifications to those report templates, you can save those reports back here into a report list and rerun them in a more personalized basis. Another thing that you're also able to do from a reporting perspective is you can, of course, use the Crystal Report Writer as your ad hoc report writer. What you would do there is use your Abra Data Dictionary. You would go out and join databases, link databases, select the field that you want to have appear in the report, and actually format the report on your own using the Crystal Report Writer tool. Another form of reporting that we have is an area down here at the bottom of the list called a query, or the Abra Secured Query. If we go out here and look at an example, we'll look at this benefit enrollment analysis and open up this example. You can see that this is a very easy-to-use tool. It's designed to be kind of a step-driven process, steps 1 through 5. And these individual steps allow us to access information, group, sort information, select the data that we want to view, and then we also have various output results as far as the way these reports are run, whether it's to a file, to the screen, to paper, whatever the case may be. So if we start at step 1, selecting a field is really a very simple thing to do. In this particular example, we're looking at a combination of benefit information and employee information. So what we do is we sort through the list and go through this list picker and select the information that we want to have appear in the report. The next step is to group the information. How do we want the information grouped? In this particular example, we want to look at somebody's last name and then group all the benefits that particular person has underneath it. The next area is to go out and sort the records. Maybe we want to sort this report by last name. Maybe we want to sort it by employee number, whatever the case may be. This is an area that you can define how you have your information sorted. Step number 4 allows us to create something called a record filter. Basically what this is an area that we can go into and define what information do we want to view for what employees. Do we want to look at terminated people? Do we want to look at only active people? Maybe we only want to look at certain employees that participate in certain benefits and things like that. If that's the case, this is a great area to go out there and build your record filters so you can kind of hone down on the information that you're trying to access. The last area here under step number 5 is the output result. This is where you're able to either run your reports, print your reports to the screen, print them out to a file, whatever the case may be. You see up in the top left corner, you can print to a landscape format or a portrait format. You can also bring it to the screen in that format as well. You can create ASCII files with your information that shows up in your reports. You can also take your reports and send them over to Microsoft Office tools. You can send it out to Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. Another thing you can do is also create data tables with your information. For example, maybe you want to take your information and publish it to an XML format. Maybe you've got information that you want to publish to a website and you want other managers to go out there and view the information through their intranet. If that's the case, perhaps publishing a report in this XML format is going to be the best way to produce your information for others to view through that intranet page. So you can see that just 5 simple steps allow you to go out here and quickly create a query of information. You're not required to go out to the report writer. You don't have to run a canned report to get this information. It's just an easy way to get the data from the system. The next area that I wanted to talk about was this area from navigation called rules. When you navigate to this particular area, you'll see that this is the area that holds all the code tables in the application. The system is code table driven. When you look at the individual screens of information, you'll see that there's lots of different pull-down windows that are available. All those individual pull-down windows in the system look at the code tables that are set up out here in the application. The idea with the code tables is that the code tables will help you keep all of your uniform unique, so you don't have to worry about information being keyed incorrectly into the system. So for example, if you've got 20 people that work in your finance department, if you decide to name half of them finance, the other half of the people you say are in the accounting department, well, when you go to run a report against the finance department, you're obviously not going to have all the information there because half of the people that are out there are listed at least under the name of the accounting department, so that information won't be very accurate. What the code tables do is just allow you to pick from a list so you can make sure that you're always selecting the right information. Also with these code tables, you can tie other bits of information to them. So for example, if we go out here and look at a job code, if I look at somebody's job code out here in the system and I look at the detail that goes along with it, if I apply a job code to a certain employee, not only do I apply the code to the employee, but I also have a job description. I've got their salary grade range, their job grouping, their EEO classifications, as well as their exemption statuses. So when I'm going to enter data into the software, this is not information that I have to add. All I do is add the engineering 1 position to the individual employee, and all the rest of this data out here on the screen is picked up. Another advantage that I have with code tables, if I go out here and look at a benefits example, is that when I work with my code tables, If I go out here and look at a dental plan, for example, a code table will help me manage my individual benefit plans, earning codes, tax codes, deduction codes, maybe courses and certifications and things like that. The reason that this particular area of the software is very powerful as far as code tables go is that when you define information that go into your code tables, you can address 2 or 3 things by just building one individual table. For example, if we look at this 2004 dental plan, this particular dental plan could actually have 3 definitions to it. It could be a dental plan for an employee. It could be a dental plan for the employee and spouse. It could be another example of a family plan, a dental 2004 family plan for one of your employees. Rather than having to set that particular plan up 3 or 4 different times in the system, you just build the plan once and then build all the other premiums around this particular plan that you have set up. Another thing that you can also tie out to these individual codes and things are certain levels of eligibility, general information as far as when the plan's available, the plan descriptions and things like that, what's the frequency of the deduction for the plan. That type of information is available as you set them up out here in the code tables. Another big advantage to using code tables is that if you do need to make changes to employees' data that are specific to information that lie out here in the code table, let's say, for example, during an open enrollment period, the price of this particular dental plan goes up in cost for the employee $5 a pay period. If that's the case, what you're able to do is go out here and take the employee premium, click into it, update the employee premium cost, and then every single employee that's in the application that has that particular benefit will automatically have their record updated. You don't have to go jumping around in the system from record to record to make those individual changes on the employee records. So the code tables are very nice as far as helping you navigate through your system, helping you set up information in your software, helping you define things like your earnings, taxes, deductions, some of your other compliance types of codes and things like that. The next area that I wanted to briefly talk about was this area called details. Details in the system are the actual screens of information. So we can go out here and as we navigate away from the Activity Center, when we get to the screens of information, we'll navigate now through this toolbar that's across the top of the screen. So if I go over here to the magnifying glass and I look somebody up, I'll find an employee and bring their information to the screen. You can see now as I go to navigate through these screens, as I go to these little icons across the top of the screen, the different information bubbles up on the screen to tell me what I'm getting ready to access related to the employee's information. So if I go out here and I want to look at current pay information, I can click on that. I see that this particular icon represents insurance benefits for the employee. I can go out there and click on that information. I see that the telephone represents emergency contacts. I can go view that information. Maybe I want to go out here and access employee note information. I can also go out there and view that type of information if it's available as well. So there's some nice ways that we can kind of navigate through the software here. The Activity Center is probably the most common area that you'll use for navigation. But remember, there's also the Organizer Scheduler that helps you schedule and organize a lot of your tasks that you're performing in the software. And then, of course, once you get into various areas of the system like the individual screens, there's also things like toolbars, custom criteria builders, and things like that that help you navigate through the rest of the application. That completes our presentation. We sure appreciate your time. Thank you.